everyone. Welcome to the Theotech Podcast. I'm here today with Emily Nelson. She's the hospitality coordinator for the Fuller Institute of Theology and Northwest Culture, and also a worship leader at a Seattle church, which is in South Lake Union. If you don't know, that's where the Amazon headquarters is. And she also is organizing a workshop on hospitality for churches and for the wider community in Seattle.
Yes.
So, Emily, thanks for joining us today.
Of course. Yeah, glad to be here.
I want to get started maybe just by talking about what you think hospitality is and why it matters.
Right. So in the Pacific Northwest, hospitality is kind of an interesting word. It can mean a lot of different things and it can mean nothing at the same time. Hospitality to me means three things.
Okay.
So you're creating a sacrifice. You're giving something up, whether it's your time, your efforts, your resources, your energy, your home, your table, your food. You're giving something up in order to create a space for somebody else. So it's this like three-step movement. In my world, that's what it's been. That's the definition. And it's this really beautiful movement of giving something of yourself to create a space for somebody else and then also for yourself too. So a lot of times when you hear the word hospitality, you can associate it with Southern hospitality. And sometimes in that culture, there can be a sense of comfort that's rooted in the other. So you're just trying to make somebody else comfortable. You're just trying to make someone else feel at home with no dissonance and no conflict whatsoever, which means sometimes you're not bringing yourself to the table.
I see.
So true hospitality to me is space for the other person and for yourself, which can sometimes lead to confrontation or maybe differences. But that's where the work of hospitality is so wonderful because you take steps forward amidst your differences. So it can be applied to all different categories. You can have hospitality in business meetings. You can have it in the home. You can have it in relationships. Oftentimes you hear about it in the food industry because that's where you're creating something. You're giving food. You're creating a space, and you're inviting people to your table literally. So that's kind of the rounded definition for me.
That's a much bigger definition than I expected.
Yeah. I've had a lot of time to think about it.
What are some of those differences between the hospitality that you would show on a personal level compared to a professional level? Like, I guess when I say professional, I mean not only in the workplace, but maybe even like if you're in the hospitality industry, right? Versus if you're just like a family or just an individual, a single person in Seattle.
Yeah.
How do you see hospitality being different for those different kinds of spaces?
The roots are all the same. I think the reasons and the motives behind hospitality is to create something together. So when you're in the hospitality industry and you are someone that owns a business, you're in the business of making people feel welcome. So that's what you're doing. I've done some research on certain tools that businesses use to make others feel welcome because they want people to come back and build community.
It's good for business.
And you can have regulars, and it's this idea of actually building a true relationship via the avenue of whatever it is that you're selling. So your food, your business does well, your community does well, your business does well. So it's the same root, but probably a little bit more of an organized format for how to go about it. I don't own a restaurant. I'm not in the hospitality industry. But I work from the home space, the space of the home. And in kind of interviewing people like Mark Canlis, my friend Allison Soki from Allison's Coastal Cafe, and kind of learning about the process of what they do, it's actually very similar to the family model of hospitality, but for a greater purpose and for kind of the broader spectrum of the community. I think I would say in the professional realm and in the family realm, there are differences. I think conflict is probably less welcomed or appropriate in the professional realm, but in the family unit and when you're looking at hospitality as this like exchange from person to person and this idea of bringing both of your ideas and personalities to the table, the conflict is a little bit more expected, I think.
That's interesting, though, because if conflict and hospitality are always kind of tied together, then it is really meaningful to show hospitality in a professional setting, both in the sense that, like, if I'm a restaurant or if I'm a hotel or something and my guest's family is experiencing conflict, then for me to create a safe space for them is one of the biggest gifts I could give them.
Seriously, yeah.
Or if it's in business, I don't know how to do this, but if, there's always fights, there's always disagreements, and learning how to facilitate a hospitable meeting, let's say, or just like, that's so valuable in the business world where people really can express what's important to them, instead of the kind of what you were saying earlier where I don't really bring myself, I'll just kind of agree to whatever just to keep the peace.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful skill.
Definitely. Like learning how to agree to disagree, but in a meaningful way instead of just blowing things off and being like, well, we're going to avoid conflict at all costs. Let's, kind of dampen these things that are true for both sides. And that actually goes very deeply into the racial reconciliation conversation when we're talking about bringing truth to the table without being ashamed of something that hurt you.
Yeah.
And holding a light to that truth for one side and also for the other. So it's a really difficult thing. It's very nuanced and very powerful, but it happens in all different aspects of our lives on an everyday basis that I think would be surprising to a lot of people.
What do you think, would you characterize Seattle culture as hospitable or not? Because people talk about the Seattle Freeze.
Right.
And there's a lot of people coming into Seattle and they're like really confused about what's the relationships they're forming here, or it's not working out the way they thought it was, where they came from. How would you characterize Seattle hospitality?
That's a big question. Seattle's character of hospitality is actually kind of different depending on where you live. So we deal with a lot of gentrification in this city, as do many cities right now in our cultural moment. And the closer towards the center of the city unit you get, the less hospitable it becomes. The further out, the more normal hospitality culture becomes as well. So we have a lot of communities on the inside of Seattle that are really business oriented, very fast paced living, very individualistic culture. And that's a word that's really key to the Seattle Freeze. So the why behind the Seattle Freeze is individualistic living.
Okay.
So people that are here for a purpose, and usually that purpose is, they're entrepreneurs, they're pioneers. The Northwest has a really deep history of pioneers. That actually is our history.
Yeah.
We came here and began a lot of new things, did a lot of new things, very creative people, but also competitive in a lot of ways, and very segmented. So the Seattle Freeze, I'm sure, is for a lot of different reasons, but that can be one of the main reasons, is that we have a really deep history of wanting to do things on our own, which can be really good and also kind of isolating.
It's difficult. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so I feel that tension where sometimes social time can feel like maybe a waste of time, because you know how much focused effort it takes to push whatever it is that you're working on forward. And so I've kind of been at both extremes where I grew up in an Indonesian church, and so I had a very strong ethnic culture. Almost all my weekends were spent with this community. We did everything together. And I could feel that tension where it's like, well, if we're ever going to grow or kind of expand beyond that, we can't always just be hospitable within ourselves, if that makes sense. And then also as an entrepreneur, I felt like, wow, I've just been like coding basically, or just like working for like the whole week, and I never surfaced for air. And so that's where I guess I need to learn to grow up. But I'm really grateful for friends of mine. Will Murray's been on this podcast before. He just like, has me over for dinner, and it's like, this
so
is
refreshing.
Nice. Yeah, it's refreshing. Like you get out of that bubble that you're stuck in as an individualist. You need sometimes that help too. So I've experienced it both ways. I guess I'm curious though about like, what is the Seattle Freeze? Like, people talk about it, but what actually is it?
Okay. Yeah. So in my experience and the things that I've been learning from different people coming into the city, I guess I would define the Seattle Freeze as this vibe that you get when you're a newcomer. And sometimes you don't have to be a newcomer to experience it. So I had a friend describe it to me as, if I'm here in Seattle and I have a breakdown, if my car breaks down on the side of the road, like who's going to stop and help me? Nobody. Like she's had that experience. And,
really?
Nobody stopped. And then, you drive like 6 hours towards the Midwest and you have a breakdown and everybody stops. It's this like embedded culture. It's this embedded understanding that you help your neighbor. You talk to your neighbor, you make eye contact with your neighbor. you show up for your neighbors. So it's the lack of that humanist vibe. So like understanding that the other person next to you on the bus is human, and they are not out to get you. They're not out to compete with your business. They're just, along for the ride just like you are. And making eye contact with them is, it's a part of life. It's something that we don't really have here. So I think it's like a disconnect. I would describe it as a disconnect, a social disconnect that some people experience depending on where you move, which can be really harmful for people that are excited about moving to Seattle, really looking forward to building community in a positive way, and have a really hard time getting plugged in. One of my friends that works at YPOS, Young Professionals of Seattle, he described it as not having a platform, not having a landing platform in the city for newcomers. So there's nowhere that people can actually, there's no like website, there's no organization, there's no group platform where people can actually come into the city and have a landing place and say, oh, if I need a job, if I need a nanny. There's lots of individual websites that you can look at, but it's really overwhelming when you move here. And there's no like solidified landing platform that says, hey, we're going to be a resource to you, and here's what we have to offer.
Like a city welcoming committee.
Yes.
Something like that. I'm familiar with like New Tech Seattle, which is a community oriented to techies, but that's exactly what they do. Every time they gather, they always ask people who's new, and they ask people who's looking for a job, and like people to raise their hands and stuff. It's like, okay, you guys get connected. Wow. And so they try to be that for people who are moving to Seattle for the tech community. It's called New Tech Seattle, friends of one of the organizers. And I think that it might be that it's just the city's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because there are many things, and there is no kind of like, this is Seattle's welcoming committee. And so it's just, maybe, it's easy to feel like you're just lost, and you can't find places like that to help you. I think like, I grew up in Seattle. I'm a Seattle native, so if anything, I probably practice the Seattle phrase unknowingly. I've heard it said it's like one of those things where people say, hey, let's go coffee sometime.
Right,
but they never actually follow up.
That'll get you, yeah.
You never actually follow up. And then neither side follows up, so then it just kind of becomes nothing.
Yeah.
I think my sister, Natasha, she was quoting me Screwtape Letters recently. C.S. Lewis said something about how men and women, their view of unselfishness is different. And how for women, they might view it as the way they can be unselfish is to trouble themselves for the sake of others. And then for men, their view of unselfishness is I don't cause trouble to others.
Wow.
Now, she brought that up, and I was like thinking about it, and I wonder, like, as a man, I can relate to that, and I wonder if it also connects with Seattle, or just like, as long as we're not kind of bothering anybody,
right. That's like a favor.
That's good. Like, we're this is like how we are kind to one another, is by not causing each other problems.
It's very tolerant.
It is tolerant, yes. It also makes it less hospitable, though, because it's the whole idea that you said that I don't bring myself to you either. Because if I did, I might cause you some problems. You might not like who I am. And I would rather not trouble you with that. I'll just be me, you be you, and that's how Seattle keeps the peace.
Wow.
I can see that being kind of an aspect of our culture.
That's really interesting. I've never heard it phrased that way, and that makes a lot of sense in this culture and in this time period. And wow, that hits home, because our habits as individuals and as men and women speak directly to where we're at as a culture. So I mean, that's huge too.
I wanted to go back to that question about individualism and hospitality, and like, do they always have to be in tension? Do you always have to pick one or the other?
Yeah. So it seems really overwhelming to become a person that's going to change the culture of hospitality. Like that in itself is just like never going to happen. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, and it's not going to be something that you can just become in one action. But what I would say is that the tension is good. Like it's good because it represents balance. So when you're working in your office alone, you are being productive. Yeah. You're getting things done on behalf of others a lot of the time. Yeah. And when you're working in your home, and when you're creating space for maybe even it is your best friend or your spouse, your mom or your dad, that's another way of moving forward in hospitality. So if you can boil it down in the simplest of forms and say to yourself, what is it that I do in my own practices and in my own daily habits that welcome others? whether it's my eye contact, whether it's the fact that I cook with people sometimes, whether it's I know how to have my neighbors over for dinner. I think the one practical tool that Seattleites can use the most, can tap into the most, that would be the most successful, the easiest thing, the most practical thing, is learning how to have people over for dinner. Just once a month, just invite someone into your home. Not necessarily out for a cup of coffee, or if you see a stranger, someone here that's new, instead of saying, the best coffee shop you can go to is right down the street, and I'd love to give you the name of that coffee shop and send you on your way. I think the challenge that can actually move things forward and change the culture is just the simple phrase of, hey, I'd like to go with you. I can take you there. Or inviting your friends over for dinner, inviting your acquaintances over for dinner. And ultimately having people in your home that think differently than you. Conservatives have liberals over for dinner. Liberals have conservatives over for dinner. People that don't speak like you, invite them into your home. Learn how to be vulnerable and make that connection and see what happens.
That's powerful. It also breaks the social convention that people say in the past, like never talk about religion, politics, and money.
It totally does. But it's time,
that convention, I don't even know where it came from.
We're in a really polarized moment right now.
Yeah.
And I think everybody can feel the damage that's happening because of that. And one of my mottos is, are you tired enough to try? Are you exhausted enough of this separation? Are you tired enough to actually reach out and try? Because this is one of our last assets is mealtime. It's one of our last cultural assets in this country is mealtime. And you actually have to be, there has to be a level of exhaustion for you to be willing and able to do that for another person.
That's a good question.
It is. It's a big question, yeah.
Has technology helped us or hindered us in this pursuit of hospitality? Or what have you seen ways that it's being used both ways, maybe?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit earlier about Airbnb and how that has brought about a lot of hospitality, staying in homes, being more comfortable staying in someone's home. There's a really great app called Horizon that's out that has helped people connect all around the world in like home sharing processes. There's Couchsurfing, which is a network online where you can just literally go anywhere in the world and find someone that's accredited and safe to stay with and have an experience in another country, in another culture that's different than your own. Facebook is really big. Facebook's a huge conversation. I think the internet in general has damaged our ability to see clearly the very practical things that we can do. I think it's kind of put a veil over the practicality of hospitality, and it's made it really difficult to actually reach out because there's this expectation, there's this like secret life that everyone has online that's just like so polished, so perfect. It's just the highlight reel. And it makes it really hard to be like, hey, like I can show up at this event. I can partake in this social group, in this social setting, without expectation of who I'm supposed to be. So I think Facebook's done a lot of good in that area too. So like Facebook events are huge for connecting people. There was a really good podcast done by Invisibilia recently that kind of talked about this guy that just went to Facebook events one after the other and his experience and what he learned, and it was just really entertaining and amazing what you can learn when you just show up. So it's like the ability to show up has been enhanced by technology. Meetup.com is really great for people that are just looking for like-mindedness and actually committing to showing up. So it's like if you can get past the barrier of being afraid to show up and engage, I think it's great. I think technology has done really beautiful, wonderful things for making it people more interconnected.
Easy to show up that way.
Yes.
Does this burden fall disproportionately on introverts then, or homebodies, or where we want to be in hospital, we want to be in a relationship, but it's like an extra burden to like go out and do stuff?
Personally, I'm an introvert, 100%. I'm an introvert who's learned to be an extrovert because unfortunately extroversion is valued over introversion in our culture. So if you're an introvert, it's really difficult to climb the ladder per se if you don't have those like insanely developed, polished social skills.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that needs to be addressed because we're missing out on 50% of the personality traits of the human beings around us when we uphold one personality trait over the other. So there are a lot of people that are both and things like that, but there's a really beautiful underrepresented part of being an introvert that is right in the middle of this conversation. So when you know how to listen to somebody, like the skill of active listening, it's probably the best thing that you can do in terms of building community and actually trying to seek to understand somebody before you seek to be understood yourself. And I think introverts in general, I mean, this is a huge generalization, but those listening skills seem to be a little bit more present. And so when we're always constantly trying to build a culture of show, build a culture of being heard all the time, like where's the room, where's the space, where's the actual space for silence, where's the actual space for listening. So I think there's definitely a balance and a tension that needs to be had between the two. Like extroverts can learn how to be quiet, introverts can learn how to speak up, but I think that both are very highly valued.
And these are the skills, I guess, that you need at the dinner table to make sure one person doesn't dominate and also the quiet get to share and like...
Man, the art of conversation, it's huge. I think, so I'm also a nanny, and so I hang out with kids all the time. And I'm noticing that the art of conversation is getting a little bit lost. There's a lot of wanting to be heard and not a lot of knowing how to listen or what to do with the thoughts that you hear. I think my generation struggles with that too. I think millennials struggle with the art of conversation a lot. However, when I experience a meal or a social time with friends that come from different cultures than me, the art of conversation is just embedded in who they are and what they do. And it's not awkward, and it's shared time, and people are ready and willing to listen, and like being interrupted is like okay from time to time, and it's just this beautiful thing that happens between a group of people. And I think that's something that we need to revisit. So
you were saying that was with other cultures, you said? People from other cultures that are coming together?
I have 2 wonderful Hispanic roommates. And our conversations are really easygoing and very authentic, it feels. I think a lot of minority cultures in this country do that very well. Also, my fiance's family is African American, and the art of conversation is alive and well in a different way than I've experienced. And I think kind of reimagining that in your own culture is really important too.
I found that as an Indonesian American, the thing, I just associate hospitality with the Indonesian food. Basically, it's like the biggest differentiator between going to, I guess, a conventional mega church or, and going to an Indonesian church. Is like, you just know after the service there's going to be this enormous feast afterwards. And it's usually, it could be potluck style. It may not all be funded by the church itself, but that is so central, and it really is what I think is the locus of the community. Besides the language, it's really the food. And the one downside of it was the insularity I mentioned earlier, where it is kind of like, this is our space, this is our time, and there's really no interest in anything outside of that for that. But the positive side is that it really does bring people together. Just that act of having an abundance of food instead of having, coffee and maybe crackers or something after a service has made a huge difference. But I think what I'd like to ask now is about how have you seen churches in Seattle in particular, think about hospitality, and how could they do differently? How could they be that platform maybe where people who are coming here have a landing spot?
So my work is geared towards that hope. So the goal of working in ministry and my goal of working in hospitality is to equip the church to be that platform. So what better opportunity is it than what we have now for the church to create that landing platform for people, at least to give them a chance to feel welcomed. I think in Seattle we are very progressive, very accepting, and very tolerant to people that are different around us. But I think taking that one step further and reaching out instead of just choosing, not to offend, there's a huge difference in that. So the practice of reaching out and the practice of saying, you are welcome here, you belong here. So much so that people might be taken aback by how welcome they feel as a human, as an individual, despite maybe social differences, despite personal beliefs. A lot of theologies and a lot of practices around the world are centered around showing somebody that they're loved, showing someone that they actually do belong, that they are a part of this family, a part of Christ's family, and teaching the gospel along the way. But that is a really central part of inviting somebody into the fold of God. Like that is a central moment in somebody's knowledge about what it means to be loved and knowledge about what it means to love others. So kind of, it's super common and really simple, but learning how to love people well, regardless if they're going to be a church member or not. So we need to focus on that. And there are really practical ways of doing that. We get really blindsided. I know in Seattle, there's like that individualistic culture bleeds right into our own church culture. So, I mean, it happens wherever you go in the world. Whatever the dominant culture is, will seep into your church doors. We are humans. We live in this world, and we're not.
The church is not immune to that.
We're not immune to that. Yeah. So I think acknowledging that and also having tools to kind of combat it is really important. So, I mean, we have that in our churches. We have churches that are right next door to one another that are competing for communities.
Yeah, and usually among people who are already quote-unquote converted.
Exactly. So basically, like right now, 2018, the church is just trading members. That's what's happening. Yeah. People are not joining the church as new members, and it's totally not who we are. This is not our identity. This is us stuck in a moment. And there are things to be done about it that are not overwhelming if we're willing to take that step as individuals.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I can see that churches might say, well, we've done evangelism, like we've done outreach, we invite people to our Christmas, Easter services, and we welcome everybody. We don't want to turn anybody away. I think that there might be some help needed to kind of see past that, to say like you think that's hospitality, but no, hospitality is so much more, right?
Yes, it's such a longer, more grueling process. I can tell you that you cannot plan an event, you cannot invite someone to an event, or create something within your own church within like a month's time that's going to make a lasting difference unless you're willing to commit to inviting your neighbors over for dinner over and over and over and over again throughout the years. It's like this, it's not exciting. It's this really long, arduous process of committing to your neighbor. And it's not glamorous, and it's not something that's going to get a lot of attention, or you're not going to get a lot of credit for that kind of hospitality, especially if you're a church that's looking to be seen and to be put on a pedestal as a welcoming church. Like it's a commitment that you make as an individual, and you encourage your congregants to do the same. And I think that expectation is really important to kind of lay the ground rules and be like, hey, this is a super long process. Are you willing to step into that? And if not, like understand that it's going to be really hard to move forward as a community. Your children aren't going to have as hospitable of an environment to grow up in if we're not ready to commit to that super long process.
And it has to be, in some ways, modeled by the leaders, just like everything else. I remember I served as an elder once, and I remember feeling really disqualified, mainly because there's a text in Titus that says that elders should be hospitable. And I felt like, I'm just a young single guy, and like I don't have people over at my house for dinner or anything like that. And it's like, am I qualified to be a leader of this church if I don't do that? And I just we never talk about that really when we talk about elder qualifications or church leader qualifications. But I just realized actually a lot of church leaders that I know, they've never had me over for dinner or anything like that. And it's just like, oh, that's interesting, just an observation. And not to put more burdens on pastors or anything like that. But it's just interesting that just something so simple like what you're describing is actually can be very rare, actually.
Super rare. Because it's not like immediate gratification.
Yeah. And also, to be clear, this is not the same thing as just having small groups in a home that meet for Bible study.
Right. I think it's totally different. Also, what you're talking about in terms of pastors having that burden, like our churches are tending to get a lot bigger and a lot more filled to the brim. And so how could a pastor possibly know
They couldn't.
Or invite you into their home?
Not if it's a big church
so
like that.
many sheep to shepherd. And community groups, small group leaders, these are the people that are going to have to lead this.
Yeah.
If you're a small group leader, you're teaching your small group how to practice hospitality as you model it yourself. So yes, small groups is a part of it because you experience hospitality in your small group. But then it's a call forward to invite people that are not a part of your group.
Yeah.
Not a part of your church.
Not over for Bible study, but over for dinner.
Yeah.
So people who are different than us can be safe in this space and kind of bring who they are to that space. That's the harder part. Everybody talks about how do we make these groups more, community-oriented, outreach-oriented, and I think most of the time it's thinking about let's kind of do a community service activity together, which could work, or let's just kind of share the gospel on the street, like street evangelism. But the idea of, no, let's just invite people who don't agree with us or believe in what we believe over for dinner and just have a good conversation together. It's like a really weird concept right now.
Yes, it is. And Make America Dinner Again is another project that I'm working on. And it's a secular-based event, and so everybody's welcome to come, and we curate a group of 8 to 10 people that are actually like opposites. So they think differently, they live differently, they're in different seasons of life, and we facilitate a conversation, a safe space. So that safe space, that hospitality, it works because it's Christ-like. And that would be the main ingredient when you're having people over for dinner that you disagree with. So you intentionally give them space, and you give yourself space, and the practice of doing that, that's what's Christ-like. That's what pushes you out of the way and allows the Holy Spirit to move and change and grow and heal. It's a very healing process. So Make America Dinner Again is just the most wonderful way to show Christ's love to people no matter where they're at, with no agenda too.
Yeah.
Simply the purpose of coming together as humans.
And you're helping to organize these dinners in Seattle, is that right?
Yes. So Make America Dinner Again is a national organization. They host dinners all around the country, and they started after the Trump election, after they started noticing that they were totally disconnected from their conservative counterparts. So it's 2 women and a couple of men that have kind of decided to create this group and this liaison effort of creating these dinners all around the country and inviting different voices to come, not just the liberal voice, not just the conservative voice. And Make America Dinner Again is it's kind of a safe political space, but it can be for all different kinds of conversations.
The Seattle Times did a study that showed that there's about 143,000 tech workers in the Seattle area, and that about, 57,000 of them were born in another country.
Oh, wow.
And of those, I think like 40% of that was from India, 13% from China. But it's just this massive influx also of immigration. And I know that's a whole other can of worms, so we don't have to cover it. But I'm thinking more about the opportunity that Amazon and all the tech companies are bringing to Seattle for churches, really. I go to a church, Union Church, which is in South Lake Union. You go to a Seattle Church, you're a worship leader there, which is also in the heart of, Amazon's headquarters. And what is it that you see we can do, both to show hospitality to all these people who are moving here, interculturally, as well as, focusing on tech, but also, I just see it as an enormous opportunity, and I just feel like a lot of times we're not really sure what to do. We already have that Christian community, and it's about, it's serving the Christian community, and we do, maybe volunteering efforts and stuff that sometimes even non-Christians want to join along, but there feels like there must be something greater that could be done. It might be as simple as dinner, but I don't know. I'm just calling out the opportunity there.
Definitely.
Getting your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a really big question, and it's something that's been on my heart a lot. I know some specifics on what it's like to live in that Amazon culture and what it actually looks like to live in a micro apartment, really tiny little living space and very long hours at work. very long, fast-paced hours at work.
Yeah.
So even like lunch breaks are super short. And yes, you have free food and it's like really great and everything, but do you have time to be human in the middle of your lunch break, and pause and reflect? And you brought that up earlier, and you were talking about how in Indonesian culture, like there's so much time. There's so much time and space for a meal, and sometimes it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
That you just wasted like 3 hours,
4 hours
4
on a Sunday
hours,
afternoon.
4 hours just sitting there like eating with a bunch of people,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh my gosh, I have so many things to do. I have so many things on my agenda so that I can become who I am and live into my identity and provide purpose and value for my life and other people's lives. So it's not like a lesser cause or anything like that, but like the aspect of time, I just really think that there's something to that when it comes to the bridge between Amazon culture and allowing people to feel welcome. I really think there has to be something central about the time that we share with others, the time that we create for others. I honestly don't know if there is an immediate solution, but I do know that inviting people into your own time and making time for people that don't have time, like they work like 11 to 12-hour days, like reaching out might even just be like learning how to create time for somebody else and check in on their day, check in with them, see how they're doing, bring them a meal even, like that kind of outreach does have to be time sensitive because they're like overwhelmed, you know, they're busy, they are the epitome of busy. I don't have any like practical tips for engaging Amazon culture, but I know that making space and time for those people is a great way to welcome them, because that's something that's unfamiliar to them. Like extra time is like, whoa, like you gave up your time to come and like hang out with me, or you know, whatever it might be.
You know, it sounds also uniquely, I guess, biblical. Just think about the Sabbath, sacred time, God's time, God's day, set apart, not for busyness, not for work, but to rest and to be refreshed. And it's, I don't know, it's just, it was in the Bible all along. Sometimes I guess with church it can feel a little bit more frenetic when you have to do a lot of things on Sunday, or it can feel like you just come in, come out. Yeah. And so there's not that sense of sacred time or time and space. But we may not have answers. I just think that you're onto something there with the time thing. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing for Amazonians, for sure.
Yes. Seattleites, let's get creative. We are pioneers. We are engineers. Like, let's find some really beautiful, creative ways to organically make time for other people. I think that we can totally do that.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the upcoming workshop that you're organizing?
Yeah, for sure.
Growing Home, right?
So, yes, Growing Home. It's potentially a movement in Seattle that is going to give people practical tools and resources for hospitality culture in the Northwest specifically. So I think it's really important to understand your own personality as a region, your own like issues and your own tendencies. Yes, okay. Your own tendencies, so that you can effectively approach the situation. So Growing Home is going to be, we're working on a website right now with blogs and resources and tools for people on like how to have a dinner party, how to engage with your neighbor without being creepy, like how
without being creepy, key point.
Yeah, how to be how to lean into authentic conversation, how to understand your own motives for hospitality and things like that. So we're going to have a great landing platform for people in the church specifically, but for anybody that wants to learn more about hospitality culture. So this event is launching that movement. So we are hosting a workshop centered around Christ's hospitality. So we're going to be leaning in as the church community. There's going to be food. There's going to be amazing catered food. We're going to have lots of different kinds of soups, vegan, gluten-free options, bread, salad, and wine. It's going to be a very beautiful moment to partake in hospitality culture as you have a meal with people around you in the moment. And it's also going to be a time to learn and engage in other kinds of hospitality. So we're going to have people that own their own restaurants and create this culture sharing with us what it means. We're going to have church leaders sharing what it means. to be hospitable and just ask a lot of questions as to what our blind spots might be and what we can do tomorrow, what we can do today to engage in hospitality culture.
Are you guys going to have other food, like ethnic foods at this event? Is it going to be intercultural as well as...
Definitely, that's the hope.
Okay.
So we are trying to get as many diverse like soups on the menu to make sure that there's a wide variety of flavor. And we're also doing a $15 discount when you bring your own bread, and that can be whatever kind of bread that you would like to bring. So you can bring sweet bread. Okay. You can bring sourdough bread. You can bring rye bread. Anything that represents your favorite kind of comfort food.
Comfort food?
Yeah.
Tosh, we should make beef stew, or we can make ramen or something like that. Yeah, that would be good.
That'd be amazing.
Food. But that wouldn't be bread. That would be soup. But can you get like $30 off if you bring soup?
I mean, we can talk about it. That'd be great.
Actually, I want to ask you before we wrap up the podcast, because that's really exciting. When's the event coming up?
The event is April 21st.
April 21st. So if you're in Seattle, you can register for that. I don't know the website. Is there a website?
Yes. It's www.christincascadia.com.
Okay.
We can link it below.
Yep, we'll link it below. That's going to be a great event to be able to have some really good food and connect with people, it sounds like, and kind of practice hospitality.
Yes, and during lunch there's going to be like an intentional guided conversation as to what it is you're experiencing as you eat, as you partake, and what that means, the practical and theoretical implications of joining together for a meal. And you're also going to hear from people that have been doing it very well in our own city's culture. So it's a learning experience, and it's also a real-time experience that you're going to kind of walk through some of these things as a community.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Also, if there are I'm going to do a shout-out. If there are churches who want to welcome people from other cultures, we do have Spiffio. Theotech produces Spiffio, real-time language translation software.
Yes.
So basically people can show up, pick their language on their phone, and get translation in real time of everything in your service. And that's one of the ways that we're trying to help churches to be hospitable to people from other cultures at Theotech.
That's
and
huge.
What I want to close with, though, is can you tell us about the best dinner you've ever had? Or maybe one of the best. I know that's too hard to say the best.
Yes, I love food. But I love the people that are like engaged in eating the food with me. So I think my experiences are really tied to
the people
that
maybe
are there.
Maybe a very hospitable experience that you had. Something that that moved you.
Okay. My mentor and his wife, the Morrows, Zawadi and Aaron Morrow, they're very hospitable people, and they don't even really know it or realize it or call it out. It's just something that they do. And when I was a junior in college, I needed a place to live for the summer, and so I like randomly emailed my professors like that I had just met and asked if anybody would let me live with them or lease a room or I could nanny, I can house clean, whatever. And Zawadi and his wife reached out and they said, yeah, sure, like you can come live with us. And they didn't know me like from the next person, and so I stayed with them for a summer. But every meal that I had with them, whether they had food in the fridge or not, was super intentional. So we would gather around the table, and it wasn't like this derived thing that was like, okay, now it's dinner time, and now it's time to gather. But it was like this gathering place. It was like the table was magnetic, And so like at the end of the day, you're just like, oh, like this is my resting place.
Nice.
Like this table, this small table, with like maybe not that much on it, or maybe a feast on it, is like my resting place. So I guess that's not like a singular experience because we had dinner all the time. Yeah. But it was like this really cool...
long-term hospitality.
Yeah, it was really... long-term, yeah. So it's a great example.
That's a really good example. I'll share one story. Mine's a short-term one. My family, we went on a cruise one time, and there were these two a waiter and a waitress, Bulan and Antonella. I remember their names because they were the most hospitable people I've ever met, I think. And I know it's their job, but I just felt like they went above and beyond because they would just notice all these details and just come ready. So like on the first night, I think my sister ordered chocolate milk or something like that. And then from then on, every single day before we even came to our table, there was chocolate milk waiting.
No way.
I'm not even kidding. And they always exuded like a genuine warmth, and maybe again they're professionals, but like you just felt like they were so happy to see you every single time, no matter whatever else happened throughout that day. And it just like puzzled me as a kid. It's like, can people really be this like nice all the time? Like not only nice, not like polite. They're like you want to give them a hug almost. And of course the food was good and everything like that, but it was really that it wasn't even the service. It was like you felt like you had a connection to them. And afterwards, you would share emails or whatever because you wanted to keep in touch, you wanted the relationship to continue. Sadly, that hasn't really continued. But I just remember that was for me that was like a bar that was said I'm just really impressed with these people and how they could make myself and my family feel so really welcome and wanted. Actually, that's what it was. It was wanted.
Wow.
They want us to be there. They're happy. So that was my hospitable experience. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us today on the Theotech podcast. If you'd like to hear more stories about how God is working in and through the tech industry and theology applied to life, you can subscribe to our channel here. And if you'd like to support us in sharing these stories, you can support us on Patreon here. All right. Until next time.